Hi, everyone. On today's podcast, we're going to talk with Ingrid Haas about fetal movement concerns, stillbirth, and her short film, Push. Hi, everyone. Today, we are so honored to have Ingrid Haas join us on the Evidence Based Birth podcast. Ingrid is an award winning Canadian writer, director, actor, and mother based in Los Angeles. Ingrid is the writer and director of Push, a powerful 7-minute provocative short film created in partnership with Push for Empowered Pregnancy. The film is part of the Stillness is an Illness campaign, which sheds light on the critical importance of recognizing altered fetal movement as a warning sign and advocating for systemic change in prenatal care. Ingrid, welcome to the Evidence Based Birth podcast.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a huge fan of the podcast, so it's such an honor to be here.
We are also super excited to have you here because this is a very important topic and one that's not covered enough, both in mainstream media and in pregnancy podcasts and birth podcasts. So thank you so much for coming to talk with us about stillbirth and fetal movement. And I was wondering if you could kind of start off by sharing your own story about how you got involved in this movement.
Yes, I'd love to. My story, I'm going to take you back because where we are here now. So I've written and directed a few films about pregnancy loss, but Push was the first one that I wrote and directed about stillbirth. But the reason I think that I was chosen to write and direct it is because of my personal experience with loss. So in 2018, I had a surprise pregnancy. I was with a boyfriend at the time and we decided to keep it, and he moved in and we were going for it. And then at 12 weeks, I experienced a miscarriage, which of course is way more prevalent than I had any idea at the time. But it rocked me so to my core. I felt like I had never heard about it. I felt like nobody was talking about it, even though people were. But it was 2018, and I think it was a little less talked about, perhaps, in the mainstream media at least. And so I wrote and directed and produced and starred in a film called Still Wild. And it premiered at South by Southwest in 2020, which is a film festival and music festival, tech festival. It was a huge honor. 2020, not a great year for film festivals or anything in groups, but I was pregnant for the second time. And I was so excited to premiere this pregnancy loss film while being 6 months pregnant at this huge festival. And this is before we knew anything was happening pandemic wise. But March 7th, 2020, I went in for a termination for medical reasons at 22 weeks, which is, I guess, almost 6 months. At my 20-week scan, they saw something and we did an amnio and we terminated the pregnancy. So then the pandemic happened. And so then it was this new loss experience. And so I wrote a feature called Before You Go, sort of about those two experiences together and pregnancy loss and how you overcome it. And we're actually in development to make that film now. This is a long-winded way of getting to Push, which is about stillbirth. So while I haven't experienced a stillbirth, I've experienced loss. And I think based on those experiences and me speaking openly and candidly about it through my Substack or through other podcasts, the foundation chose me to write and direct the film Push, which is about fetal movement and what people need to look out for. The foundation is run by women who have all experienced it. So I was able to talk to all these women and learn about it firsthand in a way that I hadn't known anything about it.
And so the film Push, it's 7 minutes long.
Yes.
But it's very powerful. And I was really struck by kind of like the two separate timelines of ways things of how things could have turned out differently.
Yes.
Just depending on different actions. So what was your approach in telling this story in that 7-minute time frame?
Yeah. So the campaign is Stillness is an Illness. So they wanted just the world to stop. And that was sort of their big, broad idea. But beyond that, they weren't really sure how to move this campaign idea into a narrative film. And have you seen the film Sliding Doors or remember it
Mhm.
with
Oh,
Gwyneth
yeah, I
Paltrow?
remember it. That was a while ago, yeah.
It was. The 90s were a great time for film.
Yes.
So I kind of pitched that idea, the sliding doors version of a pregnancy loss. And yeah, what can happen when you listen to your body, when your partner listens to your concerns, when a healthcare professional takes your concerns seriously. And we decided to film it in that way. And it was a 1 day shoot. It was crazy. The actors were incredible. We had so much to cover in 1 day with limited resources and, budget concerns and stuff. But I think we came up with something really beautiful. And yeah, we hired Black actors because a big part of maternal mental health and people being ignored is that demographic. And that's a whole other topic that we can talk about. But yeah, that's sort of what we made. And I'm really proud of it. And so now it's being sort of sent to medical professionals and trying to help doctors understand how to listen to patients, which feels really basic.
Yeah, I was struck by that while watching it as well, that it would be really good for use in the classroom for educating nurses, doctors, midwives, and others.
Yes.
Can you tell our listeners, since they haven't, many of them probably haven't watched it yet, like what is the narrative? You mentioned the sliding doors, and we talked about like the alternate timelines. Like what's the other timeline? You talked about the one where you're listened to. What about the one where they're
Right.
ignored?
So there's a basically yin and yang or happy and sad version. So we have two characters, a husband and wife, and we wake up in the morning and she gets out of bed and she feels something different, or rather, she doesn't feel anything and she's panicked. That's the kind of opening scene. That is the opening scene. And then we split off into realities. So it's both visually different. And so we wanted to make the audience aware that you're seeing two different versions. So one is very grainy, dark, the shadows are there. And then the other one is brighter. We used a lot more beauty lighting and everything feels a little happier. And so in one version, the doctor says, come into the hospital right away. And that's the one that's dark and grainy. The other version is, I think you're fine. Don't even worry about it. You'll be good. And
Mhm.
that's the happy, because we assume with the doctor, you reach out to a doctor and they are not concerned. We assume that's going to be the version that ends up with a baby. Of course, that isn't how it happens. It's this classic reversal in film. So the one that looks it's directed sort of like a horror film is the one where everything is taken very seriously and people's tone is very serious and concerned. And that is the one where she ends up with a living child at the end. And the other version where it's blue skies ahead kind of overall tone of the film is when she's told to have a glass of orange juice and sort of ultimately chill out. And so she's watching TV. The doctor tells her to rest, watch a film. They're on the couch. And there's the saying, mothers always know. And hopefully they do. But she is on the couch. She says, something is not right. And she doesn't want to feel like she's a burden to the healthcare professionals, or she doesn't want to seem like she's questioning the experts, which for me is a real concern as a woman. I never want to feel like, oh, I'm questioning the expert. How dare I?
Yeah,
This,
they're the ones with the medical degree.
yes,
Yeah.
how dare I think I know better than them? And so she, takes the whole day, and a whole day is the difference between life and death. Eventually she goes into the hospital, and even when she's going into the hospital, she's sort of, her and her husband are both like, this is so silly. Why are we even doing this? And yes, that is when the two realities really take shape, and we realize that one, we're going to end up with a living child, and one, we have to deliver a stillbirth.
Mm.
Yeah.
And, what challenges did you face in bringing that story to life? Because, you did have amazing actors, but it seems like that would be very difficult topic to film.
Yeah. I mean, my actors were incredible. But in terms of filmmaking concerns for me as a writer director, having not experienced this, my other films, The Pink was about breastfeeding, and it was a challenge. It was a thriller about that whole industry that came from a real place for me. And my other film, Still Wild, was about miscarriage, and that came from a real place for me. So the challenge for me as the writer director was trying to get this right, was doing justice to the people who have experienced this and who have gone through this incredible loss. Despite having done a ton of research and speaking to women both in the Push Foundation and beyond, I still can't fully grasp how devastating that would be because of breast milk coming in after your body goes through so much. But I was just trying to do justice to that. So the challenge was to make it feel authentic, to not be pushing it too much into melodrama in a way that is off-putting. So
Mhm.
try and keep it grounded in reality. And also, I'm a comedy person. That's where I come from. So trying to find levity in places to keep it moving so that it's not this heavy thing that you're slogging through watching. You still want a film to be entertaining if that's what you're making, as opposed to just, an educational tool. I still wanted to make something beautiful and impactful.
Mhm.
So it was just towing that line creatively while also doing justice. And a big part of that was having those women on set with us so we could turn and ask them, does that feel real? Would you say something like that? Because, of course, I can tap into my feelings of loss and my feelings of devastation, and I can input that into a script. But I've never been through that specific thing. So having those women there, those mothers who have experienced it, and then encouraging me and saying what felt real or what didn't was really helpful. And of course, challenge wise with film, with indie film, this wasn't supported by a studio or anything. Finances always, everyone took a pay cut for this. It was done purely because people felt this was important. And so everyone there was really amazing. I
Mhm.
can really thank my producers for bringing in people who, crew who really wanted to be there. And of course, the actors who, my first time, as an actor, I've auditioned 1,000 times, but it was my first time getting auditions and watching, tapes from all these different actors. And it was so cool to see people how they took this text and made it their own and what they did to yeah to make it feel authentic for them. So we had
Mhm.
people labor in the auditions, just
Oh,
like
like pretend
what.
they were in labor in the audition.
Yes, because it's beyond just like being a good actor, labor is really vulnerable, as you know.
Mhm.
And acting like you're going through labor can feel really caricature if done incorrectly. It can feel too broad and
Too
yeah.
dramatic or
Yeah, too dramatic or just not based in reality. And I never went through a vaginal delivery, so I only kind of imagined what it would look like. But so basically my only experience with labor was the YouTube videos that I watched to try and really understand how much screaming really goes on, or is it more silent? Is it more focused? And and that's kind of where I landed in the film. But the only other experience of labor was the YouTube and films. And often labor is comedy. It's used in comedic films more than drama, or you see the really huge screaming and hitting your husband and get out of here, and the husband saying terrible things. So, yeah, it was a big learning curve for me.
and of course depicting labor with a stillbirth is also quite
Yes.
different.
Yeah.
So
It is really different. And so that moment in the film, I don't want to give it away, but I hope people do really watch it because that was something I was really proud of creatively. you don't really know when she's going through labor which reality she's living in, because we kind of blended both worlds. I spoke to there's a blue skies version, and then there's the dark, grainy, indie feature
But all the same
version.
characters and everything.
All the same characters, but in that moment, both films sort of come together, and you're living in both realities. And the hope is that the audience is hoping for one, but we don't know which one we're in. And then it cuts to the devastating reality and then the live birth reality. And it was a very emotional set, you know? It was
Mhm.
hard. I think it was cathartic in ways for people, but it's tough. That's a challenging thing for both actors and crew to feel and experience, even if that reality is not real right there. We were in a room we were in a studio space, but it looks exactly like a labor and delivery room.
Mhm.
And we had incredible actors, and it's tough. It's tough. You realize how much you take home with you after a day like that. And realize that we can kind of brush it off, but other people, or we can let it go and leave it at the studio. But other
Mhm.
people, that's the life that they're living. That's the reality that they're in, and that's sort of the final shot is them pulling up into their driveway,
Mhm.
and this is their new reality. This is yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, they don't in real life don't get to walk away from a set. It's really happening, real people.
yeah.
And I think the two timelines aspect is so brilliant because not of course not all stillbirths are preventable, but a large percentage are. So can you tell us a little bit about the Stillness is an illness campaign and like what that means, what it involves and what you're trying to educate people about?
Stillness is an illness campaign. It was created by a marketing company that was hired by Push, which is the foundation of women who have experienced stillbirth. I'm not sure the number of women in there, but I met at least 10 women. We had a premiere in New York. And the goal, not only with Stillness is an illness campaign, which is mostly the film, but also there's a whole website that you can go to called stillnessisanillness.com, where it gives you tons of information, what to look out for, what are some signs. But the main goal here is for it to be more common knowledge and for educators, both in the school system, medical school, but also for medical professionals. Because the reality is that many women are being ignored with their concerns, and many pregnant people are not advocating for themselves or even recognizing that there is a problem until it's too late. If you ever feel, and I forgot to mention this, I was pregnant while I was making this film.
Oh wow.
So I think I was probably 4 or 5 months pregnant when we shot it, but it was a full year between writing the film, pitching the film, writing the film, hiring everyone, making the film, editing it, and then going on the campaign. So that was a whole other thing I had to kind of meditate on. And I often think we can control our reality, but in many ways we can't. And I sort of decided that this was such an act of service for me to do that for this child, and also just to educate myself, to be acutely aware of the realities so that I can be prepared for whatever could come my way during that pregnancy. But the goal is to prevent stillbirths. So that is counting fetal movement, understanding when movement has stopped and when to feel concern. And there's a big thing for me is like my babies don't necessarily kick all the time. So it's hard to know exactly when they haven't kicked for a long time or when they're just sleeping in the womb. And that's something we're trying to educate on. I think a lot of doctors, we put this in the film, say drink a glass of orange juice and then you'll feel them kick more. That was something somebody told me with my first pregnancy. And it can work for some, but it doesn't. Like a cold glass of water works for some, but some babies it doesn't. So you have to really be aware of what you're looking out for. Of course, like to your point, lots of stillbirths are not preventable, but a lot of them are if taken seriously early on.
And we covered the importance of kick counting in episode 243. So I just want to direct people to the Count the Kicks team that were featured on that episode. And I was looking on the Push website. If you go to pushpregnancy.org/resources, there are a lot of free resources there for stillbirth prevention as well, including like a screenshot that you can take with quick stillbirth prevention reminders, some statistics, educational materials, other ways to empower yourself with knowledge. It's a difficult topic because kick counting can be different for different people.
Yeah. This topic is really interesting and it's perhaps a little more complicated than I'm giving credit because kick counting can look really different for everyone. So, for example, my second live birth pregnancy, I had an anterior placenta, which means the placenta was basically closer to my belly button, as you know, as opposed to the other side. So, I really did not feel a lot of movement throughout my pregnancy, which was concerning. And it's kind of hard to know when it's a problem and when it's not. I just tried to keep in very verbal contact with my doctor and nurses to make sure everything was okay. Of course, I had a geriatric pregnancy. The term, as you have said many times, is rude, and we need to change that name.
And you had a history of loss, like prior losses. So that must have made it even more stressful not being able to do the kick counting, which is an evidence based way of monitoring baby when you have the
Yes.
anterior placenta.
Yeah. You know, being pregnant after loss is really, really difficult because I know with my first live birth, that pregnancy was so challenging all the way through. I didn't tell anyone I was pregnant until 20 weeks, like my parents, my siblings, nobody. And then after that, it was still anything could happen at any time. It really stole the joy from what I heard women have experienced with pregnancy. And I was lucky enough to get pregnant again and have a second child. And I will say that that was the placenta with the anterior placenta. That pregnancy was a lot lighter. And I think it was because I had this perfect child in my world. And the way I felt better was I'm so blessed with this young lady that whatever happens with this pregnancy will be okay. And it like so sad to think that that's how I had to manage that reality.
It's
It
like you
makes me really
almost couldn't accept the fact that it was possible to have a second child, living child, until they were in your arms.
yeah. I mean, with both pregnancies for sure, but it breaks my heart to think I kind of just accepted that I could lose this pregnancy too, and that would be okay because I have this beautiful living child. So that was tough for sure. Yeah.
One myth that I know parents hear towards the end of the pregnancy is that the baby runs out of room,
Yes.
so they don't move around as much, which is a myth, correct?
Right. Yes, absolutely. They say that the size of the baby, they can't, exactly to your point, they can't punch, they can't kick, but babies should be moving. They should be, yeah, their arms and legs should be moving,
Hmm.
right? They
Right.
should. Yeah, we need to be counting kicks and making sure that your baby is moving all the way through your pregnancy. And especially, with my anterior placenta, I couldn't feel it, but you can still feel the baby inside your body. It's not as obvious, like to the touch that I felt with my first pregnancy, where I'd see the leg coming out or the elbow, but you can still feel movement inside your body, which is as opposed to like right outside, if that makes sense.
Right. It's not like you see the punch coming out of your belly, but you should still be able to feel.
Feel.
Yeah.
The punch coming out of your belly is a beautiful thing to feel
Yeah.
and
Or the
see.
foot.
That's
You can see the
y-
foot kicking you.
yeah. The first time you
Yeah.
see that, it's really amazing.
What kind of response have you seen so far to Push? Any reactions or stories from viewers or from the foundation that have resonated with you?
Well, I mean, social media is so incredible for this because the amount of literal people who've experienced this and feel so seen and heard by the film has been one of the most rewarding things that I've experienced. When we put it online and it went wide, that was really astounding just to hear from both men and women who've experienced this in their family, or somebody whose parent experienced it. So that's been really amazing. Also, we've been nominated for an M&M award, which is an advertising award in the medical field. It's getting out there and people are watching it and feeling impacted by it. So that's been really amazing. Yeah. But it's been the personal connection and the personal impact that it's had on people that's really touched me as a filmmaker,
Mhm.
because you really
Yeah.
want to make something that makes people feel.
Yeah, because it's when they're truly touched by the information, they'll remember it and they'll take action the next time.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like this film is probably just as important, if not more important, for healthcare providers because a big part of a lot of people's stories is, they dismissed my concerns or they told me I'm just anxious or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or yeah, don't worry about it. Or there's been so many different anecdotes of what people have said, and you feel like, don't doctors take an act of, what's the word? The oath of, to do no harm. And I'm sure they're not intentionally trying to do harm, but so much harm has come from people being ignored and
Mhm.
dismissed. And so we really hope that that's the main thing, both the medical field and women primarily listening to your bodies and counting kicks and knowing when to call somebody.
So, for listeners who want to watch the film, what's the best way to access it?
Yeah. So please head on over to pushpregnancy.org. And the campaign is right there. You just click on it. It says a film by Ingrid Haas. And that's where you can see the film. So it's pushpregnancy.org.
Okay.
And that will take
Awesome.
you to a link. Yet. And of course, it's on my website and on their social media as well.
Thinking back to the film, one quote that sticks out to me is, the doctor saying, I want to assure you everything has been textbook with your pregnancy. You are not high risk. And just like from the very beginning of the timeline where the baby does not survive, their concerns are dismissed.
Right. And I think a big part is the geriatric pregnancy aspect. If you're not a geriatric pregnancy, people feel like there
Nothing bad
should
is
be
going to happen to
nothing
you.
bad is going to happen and everything terrible is going to happen if you have a geriatric pregnancy. It's like so black
Oh,
and white,
yeah.
like from when I was pregnant, every time was a geriatric pregnancy. And it felt like I was told my body was breaking constantly and
Like they
nothing
expected
natural.
it to go badly.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
those expectations often lead to, I mean, I don't want to say that, but our energy does affect things. And so, yeah, being told your body's not going to work the way that it naturally should. But yes, to the point of, this can happen to anybody at any age. It doesn't pick and choose specific women or specific ages. But I did want to mention, going to the website, you can sign the petition, which is really important, and you can donate if that's something that is something you would like to do.
And what is the petition for specifically?
So the petition is to add your name to the petition asking for improved US protocols to prevent stillbirths. So the more names, the better. So please add your name to this list. We will not be cold emailing you or doing anything, but you're just going to be adding your name to help impact US protocols to make change.
And I think, yeah, that's a whole nother topic we could go into, that other countries have been updating their protocols and implementing stillbirth prevention bundles, and they have seen stillbirth rates decrease substantially in many countries. That's something that here in the US we'd like to see as well.
Absolutely.
So looking ahead, Ingrid, you've used your creative voice in a lot of ways to advocate for, families who are pregnant, birthing, or lactating. Do you have any other future projects where you're hoping to advocate for maternal and fetal health?
Yes. Well, I created a Substack, which is doing really well, and I'm really excited about it. And it's mostly based in motherhood and the challenges that we face. One topic that I'm excited to talk about is the difference between my two pregnancies and how I experienced postpartum anxiety in a very, very scary way with my first child, and how much having a second child really healed that experience for me because of medication that I got on immediately. But I don't feel like people should have to have a second child to heal from the trauma of the first. So I'm just talking really candidly and openly on my Substack. So I'd love for people to find me there. Of course, creatively, I'm still auditioning and being an actor and writer and writing features. So I'm doing lots of stuff. But in terms of maternal mental health and advocating for that, I'm writing really openly on Substack.
Yeah. Well, we'll make sure to link to your Substack in the show notes. And thank you, Ingrid, for
Thank
all
you.
your work you do advocating for families and this whole range of these really important subjects, from pregnancy loss to stillbirth to breastfeeding to postpartum mental health. We really appreciate the work you're doing.
Hey, coming from you, that means a lot. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you do. I learned so much from you.
All right, everybody, that wraps up our interview with Ingrid. Please go check out the short film and incorporate it whenever you can in educational materials. I think it's a really critical piece of artwork that we now have in our hands. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye. Today's podcast was brought to you by the signature articles at Evidence Based Birth. Did you know that we have more than 20 peer-reviewed articles summarizing the evidence on childbirth topics available for free at evidencebasedbirth.com? It takes 6 to 9 months on average for our research team to write an article from start to finish, and we then make those articles freely available to the public on our blog. Check out our topics ranging from advanced maternal age to circumcision, due dates, big babies, Pitocin, vitamin K, and more. Our mission is to get research evidence on childbirth into the hands of families and communities around the world. Just go to evidencebasedbirth.com, click on blog, and click on the filter to look at just the EBB signature articles.